It had been over a year since he had phoned. I should have learned something from that alone. However, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time when the phone rang that Thursday afternoon, and Darren's name appeared on the screen. The type of excitement that causes your chest to briefly rise before you even say hello. He mentioned that my granddaughter Emily was having a small birthday celebration, and they thought it would be great if I could go. He spoke as if it were commonplace, as if we hadn't danced around quiet for the past few years. I should bring those sugar cookies I used to make, he even joked. The ones with the cinnamon icing and chipped edges. Outside, it was softly raining, the rain that makes the world softer. I recall it because I remained at the window, holding the phone, for a full minute after we hung up. This was the beginning of something fresh, I told myself. Perhaps things did finally get smoother with time. Perhaps motherhood wasn't always a lost proposition. That evening, I took my time packing, pulled out the blue dress I saved for special events, and ironed it personally. Slipped in an old picture of me and Darren when he was still wearing braces and enjoyed holding my hand in public, and tucked in a scarf that Emily had crocheted by hand. That one remained concealed in my purse's lining, not for the sole purpose of being remembered. There's something special about preparing for a trip as an adult. You take your time. Everything is impacted by you. You wonder how it would feel to have the house to yourself for a few days. You softly close the refrigerator door. Slowly water the plants. That night, I didn't get much sleep. Not out of concern. From optimism. I hadn't had anything to look forward to in a long time. That wasn't a new soup recipe or a drugstore sale. It was Friday morning. I checked the clock once more while standing at the entrance with my coat erect on my bag. 8:13. Darren promised to stop by at about 8. It's funny how waiting for someone you care about can make 5 minutes seem like 50. He arrived shortly before 8:30, music too loud for a morning, windows down. He grinned as if nothing had happened, as if this had always been the case. I also grinned. Mothers do it even when they have no idea what will happen next. They grin. They leave. Hold on. You understand what I mean if you've ever traveled with more hope than clothing. He parked close to the train station's side door. Even though the sky was already light, the silence of the early morning persisted in the air. No traffic. Don't hurry. The only sounds are the occasional passing automobile and the soft buzz of birds. Leaning over, Darren opened the trunk. I went outside, my knees tingling a little from the abrupt shift. He didn't accompany me out, remained in the driver's seat, tapping the steering wheel with his fingers as if he had more important things to do. I grabbed the luggage and dragged it to the edge of the curb. "I've already picked up the ticket," he responded, rolling down the window. Instructed me to wait inside. Soon, the train would arrive. Said that before going to the residence, he had a brief errand to run and wanted to get coffee. Something about the messiness of the new caterer. Then he gave me a grin. Not very broad, not pliable, only a flicker. Similar to someone briefly turning on a light and then turning it off again. He changed gears and withdrew before I could say anything more. No embrace. Don't turn around. Only fading taillights down the road. After bringing the luggage closer, I entered the little station. It was outdated. Not much had been changed since the 1970s. The floor was fastened with vinyl seats. In the corner, 2 vending machines are whirring. A wall clock with an excessively loud ticking sound. After locating the ticket booth, I provided my name. After typing something, the woman behind the glass scowled and shook her head. She inquired as to whether I was certain it had been bought today. I gave a nod. After taking another look, she stated that there was no reservation under that name. I looked in my handbag. No ticket on paper, no confirmation via email. 3% was all that was left on my phone. There was no charger in my luggage. I waited while sitting erect next to the window luggage. 5 minutes, then 10, then 30. No phone call, not a message. No, Darren. I made an effort to keep my mind from racing. I told myself he had a lot going on. He could have been trapped. Perhaps the ticket will arrive shortly. Perhaps there was a simple confusion at the counter. Another hour passed. I stood up and walked outside, hoping maybe I'd see the car pulling back in. But the curb was empty. No familiar silver SUV. Just a stray dog trotting across the lot, and an older man buying a newspaper from the stand. I went back inside. The benches were harder this time. The silence louder. I sat down, pulled my coat tighter, and stared at the same clock. The second hand moved steady and smooth, like it had nowhere else to be. Unlike the person who was supposed to be here, I didn't know it yet, but I was no longer a passenger. I was the one left behind. I stayed seated for as long as I could. After another hour passed, I stood and paced the small terminal. The clerk behind the glass gave me a sideways glance, but she didn't say anything. No one did. I was just another old woman waiting for something no one else understood. I tried Darren's number again. This time, it rang once before going straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. My voice felt tight in my throat. I didn't trust it to sound calm. I stepped outside. The sky had turned sharper clouds beginning to gather near the edge of the horizon. I searched the lot again, even checked the back of the building as if Darren might suddenly appear like a bad magic trick. But there was no sign of him, not even a trace of the car. I walked to the edge of the curb, hoping for a cab or maybe a rideshare. My phone screen was black now, battery gone, no charger, no backup, just me and the low hum of passing wind. I flagged down a woman who looked kind enough, asked her if I could borrow her phone for one quick call. She hesitated, but handed it over. I dialed Darren again. One ring, then a fast click. He had declined it. I gave the phone back and thanked her. She didn't ask anything, just nodded and walked off. Back inside, the bench felt harder than before. I opened my purse, checked every pocket twice. I found a $10 bill folded next to some tissues. That was all the cash I had. I hadn't packed thinking I'd need money. I wasn't supposed to be traveling alone. I looked around the room. A young man with headphones, a woman with 2 kids asleep on her lap. No one was looking at me. That might have hurt more than if they had. At least then, I'd exist in someone's eyes. I sat with my hands folded in my lap, quiet and still. The clock kept ticking. That same second hand, steady and unbothered. A soft voice broke through. "You look like you could use something warm." I looked up. An older woman about my age stood holding a to-go cup. She wore a denim jacket frayed at the collar and had kind eyes. She introduced herself as Ruthie, said her bookshop was across the street. Nothing fancy, just paperbacks and bad coffee. But it was warm. Said I could sit for a bit if I wanted. No pressure. I nodded. I didn't have the energy to decline. We crossed the street slowly. My suitcase wheels caught on the sidewalk cracks. Ruthie noticed and slowed down to match my pace. She didn't talk much after that. Just led me through the front door of the shop and pointed to an old armchair by the window. She didn't ask what had happened. She just let me sit. And for the first time that day, I let myself stop pretending I was okay. The shop smelled like old pages and something faintly toasted. Not warm, not sweet. More like overbrewed tea and dust. It was quiet, but not the kind of silence that stung. This one settled around you, let you breathe in it. Ruthie moved behind the counter without a word. She turned on a small electric kettle, pulled down 2 chipped mugs from a shelf. Her hands moved slowly, but there was no shakiness in them, just age lived in and steady. I sat in the armchair by the front window. It was deep and low, the kind that forces your spine to settle. My coat still on, purse in my lap. I didn't move much. I wasn't ready to. Ruthie poured tea and handed me a cup. No questions, no small talk, just the quiet kindness of someone who had clearly been there before. We sat like that for a while. I watched cars pass outside. A group of teenagers laughed loudly as they walked by, their joy so distant from where I was sitting. It felt like another country. I sipped the tea. It was bitter. The kind of bitter that grows on you if you let it. Eventually, Ruthie spoke. Said she'd run the shop for nearly 30 years. Said people didn't read like they used to, but she kept it open anyway. Something about the weight of books anchoring her in a way nothing else could. I nodded. I understood that. You can measure a whole life by the books you keep. She didn't ask my name, didn't ask why I was there, just talked around the silence like it was an old friend. She mentioned she once got left at a bus station in Tulsa. Said it wasn't the same as being forgotten. It was worse. It was being made invisible. I looked down at my hands. They didn't shake either, but they stayed clenched. My fingers pressed tight together around the ceramic mug. I hadn't cried, not even at the station, but in that chair, listening to the soft creak of floorboards under Ruthie's steps, something inside me folded a little. She walked to a back shelf, pulled down a book, and placed it beside me. Said I could read or just hold it. Said sometimes the weight of a story helped more than the story itself. The cover was worn, the title half faded, but the spine held strong. I sat there a long time. I didn't open it. I just let it rest in my lap, that small, solid thing, something that hadn't abandoned me. By late afternoon, the sky outside turned gray. Ruthie handed me a blanket and told me I could stay as long as I needed. No rush, no clock. I stayed. And that night, I slept in a bookshop, with my coat on a book unopened and a cup still half full of cold tea. And somehow I felt safer there than I had in a very long time. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of someone flipping pages. Ruthie was already at the counter, her glasses sliding low on her nose, reading something old and heavy. The shop felt warmer than the night before. Or maybe I just did. She made oatmeal on a small hot plate behind the counter. No sugar, no milk, just plain oats and a handful of raisins. I ate quietly, every bite slow, letting the warmth spread through my chest. After I finished, she handed me a clean dish towel and nodded toward the sink. That was how we said, "Thank you." By noon, I told her I needed to head home. She didn't ask where that was, just handed me a paper bag with 2 granola bars, a bottle of water, and a folded umbrella. Said she had a feeling the sky wasn't done yet. It wasn't. The clouds broke open halfway through the bus ride. Rain tapped the windows like it knew something I didn't. I sat near the back, my suitcase on the floor between my feet, water pooling under the wheels. By the time I got back to my apartment, everything felt heavier. I peeled off my wet coat, set my suitcase by the door, and walked straight to the small filing cabinet in my bedroom closet. The drawer stuck a little from humidity, but I yanked it open. There in the middle folder were the papers Darren probably hoped I had forgotten about. The trust account, the one my late husband set up before his first surgery. It was supposed to go to Darren and Emily eventually, but I was still the primary trustee. I pulled out the folder and sat at the dining table, flipping through each page. The terms were clear. Funds could only be released under my written approval. There was a clause about mental competency, a safeguard my husband insisted on after seeing what happened to his own mother. Any claim of diminished capacity required independent medical verification. I knew what Darren had tried. I had felt it for months in the way he spoke to me slow and patronizing, the way he double-checked things I said. How he offered to help manage my mail, handle my appointments, always with that same gentle voice that carried a quiet insult underneath. I opened the envelope tucked behind the last page. It held a recent letter from the bank, a notification. Darren had submitted a request to begin partial withdrawal. He had also included a letter signed in my name, authorizing the release. But it wasn't my signature. I stared at it for a long time. The loops were wrong, the slant too sharp. He had copied it from the birthday cards I used to send Emily. He must have thought I wouldn't notice, that I wouldn't even check. I folded the papers back up, placed them neatly in a new envelope, and set it aside. He thought I was slipping, but I remembered everything, especially this. The next morning, I called Kendrick from the old landline in my kitchen. He answered on the second ring. His voice hadn't changed, still deep and steady, like someone who had spent his whole life reading contracts and catching people's mistakes. I told him I needed to come by. He didn't ask why, just gave me a time. I took the bus into the city. The rain had stopped, but everything still looked wet. Sidewalks shining like someone had poured varnish over them. Kendrick's office sat in a quiet brick building tucked between a post office and a law library. I hadn't been there since my husband's funeral. He opened the door before I even knocked. Let me in with a nod, offered me the same brown leather chair I used to sit in when we signed the first version of the trust. It squeaked the same way when I leaned back. I slid the forged letter across the desk. He didn't pick it up right away, just looked at it, then looked at me. You remember what we wrote into the original documents? I nodded. Every word. He opened the bottom drawer of his desk and pulled out a red folder marked with my husband's initials. Inside was a sealed envelope I hadn't seen before. Kendrick broke the seal and unfolded the contents. It was an addendum to the trust signed 6 months before my husband passed, a clause that had never been triggered. It stated that if any beneficiary attempted to manipulate, falsify, or coerce the trustee in any way, the trust would be frozen immediately. Permanent disqualification unless reinstated by unanimous vote of 2 named legal advisors, both of whom were deceased. Kendrick placed the page in front of me and tapped the paragraph with his finger. This gives us authority to act. All we need is written notice and evidence. I have the letter you brought. That's enough. He handed me a pen. I signed. He made a call to the financial institution. His tone never lifted, never dipped, just flat and calm. Stated the clause, cited the section, named me as active trustee with full control. By the time he hung up, the account was frozen. No access. No notification to Darren until reviewed. I leaned back in the chair and stared at the framed painting on the wall. A quiet forest gold leaves path disappearing into a soft blur. My husband had chosen it, said it reminded him of the woods behind his childhood home. I never liked it. Too quiet, too uncertain. But that day, I understood it a little more. Kendrick slid the folder back into the drawer and locked it. He said nothing more, just walked me to the door, placed a hand on my shoulder, and waited for me to exhale. I didn't say goodbye. I just walked out. And for the first time in weeks, my steps felt like mine again. I got home that afternoon and didn't bother taking off my shoes. I went straight to the kitchen table, pulled out the envelope from Kendrick, and laid it flat beside my notepad. The bank had frozen the trust, but that wasn't enough. Not for me. I sat down, clicked the old desk lamp on, and began writing a letter. Not to Darren. That part of me had already gone quiet. I wrote to the office of the Inspector General. I listed everything: the forged signature, the false medical claims, the attempt to bypass legal consent. I made sure to include the dates, names, institutions. I had no interest in drama, just truth, quiet and full. I attached copies of the forged document and Kendrick's statement. signed it all in blue ink. I sealed the envelope and slid it into my purse. The post office was only 4 blocks away, and the air that evening was sharp and still, the kind of air that makes you feel awake in a way coffee never could. I mailed the letter with a receipt confirmation, watched the clerk stamp it, and toss it into the canvas bin like it wasn't holding the weight of a family breaking. I didn't flinch. I just turned and walked out. Back at home, I opened the kitchen drawer and pulled out my checkbook. I hadn't used it in months. I sat at the table and began writing small checks, one to the retirement fund I had let lapse, one to the heating company to prepay winter service, one to a local literacy group I used to volunteer with before Darren told me I was too tired to keep doing things like that. Each check felt like a small reclaiming, not revenge, just restoration. 2 days later, Kendrick called. Darren had finally reached out. He wanted answers. Kendrick told him the truth. My chest was frozen. The documents were under investigation. There would be no access, no payout, no more quiet theft. Darren didn't call me. He didn't leave a voicemail, but I knew he heard it. The silence said more than words would have. Later that week, I went to the bank myself. Not because I needed to, just because I wanted to look the teller in the eye when I asked to confirm control of the account. She looked at the screen, then at me, and nodded. I was still the sole authorized party, still the one who decided what happened next. I walked out with the slip folded in my coat pocket. It was just a piece of paper, but my hand stayed on it all the way home, as if it might float away if I let go. That night, I had tea at the kitchen table, lights off except for the stove light. Outside, the street was quiet. Inside, my chest didn't feel tight anymore. I hadn't raised my voice, hadn't made a scene. But he no longer had access to what he thought was already his, and I had taken back what was always mine. The call came through the apartment intercom late Wednesday morning. I was folding towels on the living room couch when the buzzer rang. It startled me more than it should have. I wiped my hands and pressed the button. It was the delivery man, a large envelope from a courier service. No return address, just my name typed clean on the label. I signed without asking and took it inside. I already knew what it was before I opened it. Inside was a copy of a letter Darren had sent to the legal review board. It was defensive, filled with long paragraphs about miscommunication, misunderstanding, misplacement of responsibility. He claimed I had forgotten conversations, claimed I had confused timelines, claimed I had been declining for some time. There was no apology, just a series of careful justifications. He never used the word forgery, never acknowledged the letter he faked. Instead, he painted a portrait of himself as a worried son trying to do the right thing. Attached was a second document, a signed affidavit from a family doctor I hadn't seen in 3 years. The date had been altered, the assessment vague. Nowhere did it state incompetence, just an observation about stress, aging, and forgetfulness. Words that could bend any direction you wanted. I set the papers aside. My hands didn't shake. I had already learned what it felt like to be quietly erased. What stayed with me wasn't the letter. It was what I found later that afternoon. I had stepped out for groceries, just milk, some bread, and apples. When I returned, my voicemail light was blinking. 2 messages. The first was from the clinic confirming my upcoming physical. The second was from Emily. Her voice was cautious, quieter than I remembered. She said she had heard things, wasn't sure what was going on, but wanted to say hi. Just hi. Nothing more. She didn't leave a callback number, didn't say where she was staying, just said she missed the cookies I used to make. Then hung up. It didn't sound like a message she was supposed to leave. It sounded like one she whispered when no one else was in the room. I sat at the edge of the kitchen chair, one hand still holding a grocery bag, and let her voice play twice. Then I deleted it. Not out of anger, out of something deeper, a knowing. She wasn't calling for me. She was calling for a version of me that had been made distant. She didn't have all the facts. Not yet. But she was beginning to see cracks. I returned to unpacking the groceries, set the apples in the bowl on the counter, bread in the drawer, milk in the fridge. The world hadn't stopped, but it had shifted, slightly, quietly, the kind of shift you only notice when the silence begins to stretch the wrong way. And in that stillness, I understood. He wasn't in control anymore, but he hadn't realized it yet. It was Kendrick who suggested we meet in person again. He said there was something I needed to hear, something he didn't want to say over the phone. We met at a diner off Union Street, the kind with cracked leather booths and waitresses who never wrote anything down. I arrived early and sat facing the door. Kendrick came in 10 minutes later, carrying a manila folder and looking more tired than usual. He slid into the seat across from me, ordered black coffee, and didn't bother with small talk. He placed the folder on the table and opened it. Inside were printed emails. Dozens. Most from Darren, a few from someone at the bank. One from a lawyer I didn't recognize. They all circled the same topic. Access. Kendrick tapped one in particular. It was dated 2 weeks before I got that phone call about Emily's party. In it, Darren outlined a plan to isolate me temporarily. Nothing explicit, just coded language, words like compliance, streamlining, managing the transition. He had been planning it, not just hoping I'd fade, but actively setting it up. The invitation, the train station, the timing, none of it was accidental. Kendrick leaned back while I read. He didn't interrupt, didn't soften the truth. I closed the folder and let my hands rest on it. They felt heavier now, not from shock, but from clarity. I asked Kendrick what would happen next. He said the bank's internal review was complete. The signatures didn't match. The attempt to access funds without authorization was logged. There would be no legal pursuit unless I filed a formal complaint. I said nothing, just nodded. He added that a second financial institution had reached out. Darren had attempted to move assets using his own firm's credentials. That move was now flagged. I let the words settle in my chest. They didn't hit like betrayal. They landed like confirmation. I had known. I just hadn't seen all the edges. We sat in silence while the waitress refilled our cups. Eventually, Kendrick stood, handed me the folder, and told me to take my time. There was no rush, no deadline, just the truth waiting whenever I was ready to use it. I walked home with the folder pressed against my chest under my coat. The air was colder than it had been in days. I didn't mind. At home, I placed the folder on the counter. I didn't open it again. Not yet. I just stood for a while, coat still on eyes on the window, where the light was starting to fade. He had played every move with the confidence of someone convinced no one was watching. But I had seen enough. And now I held the final piece, the one he forgot I still had. The knock came just after 6, not loud, just 3 short taps like someone testing the weight of their own presence. I stayed seated on the couch, lights off, except for the one over the sink. Through the peephole, I saw him. Darren. Suit jacket, slightly wrinkled phone in hand, shoulders squared like he was about to deliver a pitch. For a moment, I just watched. Let the stillness fill the space between the door and my chest. He knocked again. This time, softer. Then waited. I didn't move. Eventually, I heard him sigh. He shifted from one foot to the other, then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an envelope, slid it under the door. Then silence. No goodbye, no footsteps down the hall, just silence. I waited 10 full minutes before picking it up. Inside was a letter, handwritten. neatly spaced, deliberate. The kind of letter people write when they think they've run out of other options. He wrote that he had made mistakes, that he had overstepped, that he thought he was protecting me from future confusion, from financial stress, from the burden of control. He never admitted what he did, just circled it, language tidy and distant. He asked to meet, said he wanted to talk face to face, said we needed to clear the air. I folded the letter once, placed it back in the envelope, and slid it into the drawer beside my keys. I didn't plan to answer. The next morning, I walked to the notary's office. Kendrick had already prepared the updated documents, full revocation of Darren's access, reassignment of secondary beneficiary, Emily's name removed for now. Kendrick said it was reversible, should I ever decide otherwise. I signed each page carefully, initials steady in the margins. The notary stamped the final form, handed me the completed copy. It didn't feel like revenge, it felt like a conclusion. On the way home, I passed a bench in the park where I used to sit with Emily when she was little. We would feed the ducks and count the leaves turning yellow in the fall. I didn't stop. I just walked past it, eyes forward. When I got home, the apartment felt lighter. Not different. Just cleaner, in a way only silence can bring. That evening, I made a small pot of soup, ate quietly at the kitchen table. Nothing extravagant, just lentils and carrots and rosemary from the windowsill. I didn't check the mailbox, didn't look at my phone. Some things no longer needed checking. That night, I slept without waking once. No dreams, no noise. Just the quiet breath of a home no longer shared with doubt. He had finally come to see me. But I no longer needed to be seen by him. He had already taught me everything I needed to know. By leaving me behind, he gave me the space to return to myself. The morning was gray, but not heavy. Just quiet in a way that made decisions feel easier. I dressed with care. Slacks. A pressed blouse I hadn't worn in months. The necklace with the single pearl my husband gave me on our 30th anniversary. It lay softly on my collarbone, a remembrance devoid of resentment. To get to the bank, I rode the bus. Darren used the same branch. In the same building, he acted that nothing was harsh as he grinned at the manager while passing documents across shiny counters. I requested the senior associate as soon as I entered, gave my name, waited. Within minutes, she emerged with a welcoming grin and an outstretched hand, showed me a little office with 2 leather seats and frosted glass. Kendrick had sent her the paperwork, which she had examined. Everything was ready, just confirmations, no inquiries. I gave the signed documents to them. The joint access is closed. Asset consolidation under my name. The investment account is redirected. All other signatures are removed. I shook my head when she asked if I wanted to leave any notices. No warnings, no cautions, only finality. She congratulated me for arriving in person, gave me a folder with my updated statements, and stamped the final page. I passed the teller booth on my way out. Behind the glass, a young man grinned courteously. I returned the smile. He made me think of a child that Darren had coached in Little League. The same stance, the same tidy, eager expression. This one, however, was still a work in progress. The wind has increased outside. I clutched the folder close to my breast and tightened my coat. I paused at the bakery at the corner. Purchased 1 apple tart. Still warm. Without being asked, the woman behind the counter added a napkin and wrapped it gently. After thanking her, I made the long walk home. I ate it at the kitchen table while observing the leaves outside the window as they fluttered in the wind. It had a clean flavor, not very sugary. The crust crumbled effortlessly. I took my time. I created a new account at a different bank later that day. Darren was unaware of one. Emily had never been to one. Drawing a fresh line in the sand was how it felt. Not to conceal, to begin from my current position. I poured myself a glass of cold water that night, observed the street below while standing at the sink. Automobiles went by. The lights were altered. Without asking, life went on. He had taken action. However, he had never made the ultimate choice, and now nothing remained to accept, just what I choose to retain. A week went by. No more phone calls, no letters, no sudden knocks, nothing except silence, the non-resonant variety. It simply settles. I returned to the bookstore. Ruthie gave me her customary nod. No inquiries, just a trembling voice and a bag. The same bitter tea was the one she gave me. This time I didn't mind. I had become accustomed to its taste. I took a seat beside the window in the same chair. I brought a book this time, one that I myself selected. In the midst of everything else, I had forgotten about the person I once loved. I read carefully, page by page, as though I were going back to a patiently waiting part of myself. I went to the market later, purchased a tiny piece of cheese and fresh basil tomatoes. It was a long time since I had prepared a decent supper. I did that evening. Not for anybody else, only for me. Even though it didn't yet have a name, there was a sense of something fresh starting in the kitchen. I opened the windows before going to bed. Allow the chilly air to enter. It had a fresh feel, as if it were removing the last remnant of him off the walls. It didn't feel like a blank room. It was restored. He wrote an old letter, which I folded. He slipped that one beneath my door. I put it at the back of the file cabinet to remind myself of my progress, not out of sentimentality. Burning wasn't necessary for anything. There were some items that simply had to be stored. I took a stroll around the neighborhood the next morning. The air is fresh. The light is gentle. I went by the train station. He left me at the same one. I didn't stop this time, though. I went by it, continued. I also didn't turn around. I hope you know you're not alone if this tale brought back memories of a time when you had to take back control of your own destiny, even if it meant being silent. Occasionally, the little triumphs are the ones that mold us the most. I see you if you've ever been made to feel invisible. You should be recognized for your strength if you have ever left without needing to be praised. Feel free to drop a silent heart below or express your opinions if this tale resonates deeply with you. It may also need to be seen by someone else.